First, the nun, a prioress. She has the best table manners around. Never spills a drop of food or drink on her clothes, which, by the way, are the best clothes in all of England. And she has this weird little dog, and she's always giving it really nice food and nice things to drink. All that for a dog? What kind of dog needs roasted meat, white bread, and warm milk to drink? I don't even get to eat that. I don't even need that. It's kind of funny, you know? For someone who lives in a convent, she probably doesn't need all of that fancy stuff. She seems a bit off, like she's trying too hard. I'd say she's a counterfeit, but who knows? She's one of those church people. She's alright. They're not all bad. Second is the monk, and he's a little bit like the nun. Supposedly, he's all about chastity and poverty, denying himself regular goods and stuff and living a life of virtue. But his horse has golden bells on it. Golden bells! And he has Gucci loafers and with his clothing, and he wears Ray-Bans. It's the strangest thing. For someone who's supposed to be so poor, he sure has nice clothing. He's not like most of the monks I meet around here. It's rare that I see one, but when I do, they keep to themselves. They don't like to be outside of the monastery usually, but this one's different. He's the outrider, so he carries out all of the monastery's jobs when they have to leave. I guess he should be accustomed to leaving if any of them are, but he's more comfortable than any of the other outriders I've seen. He's definitely not short on cash, and he doesn't seem to put much stock in those decrees from Saint Benet and Saint Maur. They always talked about poverty and chastity, but with this guy's clothes and golden bells on a horse, those aren't for him, I guess. Then there's this friar. Normally when I meet these type of folks, they ask to be called brother, but not him. He wants to be called Hubert, which is his name, for some reason. I don't know. Most of them want to be called brother. He's an odd sort of fellow. He seems like the nicest guy around. But it's kind of funny. He seems extra forgiving to rich people, which sort of seems like it defeats the point of his job. Shouldn't he be equally forgiving and equally penitent to everyone? Beats me. He's making money somehow, though, because even though he's supposed to be a beggar, he has this double worsted coat, and it always keeps him warm. He unnerves me a bit, even though he's nice. He always has his eyes on the girls who serve tables at my tavern. He gives them little trinkets. I always thought that friars were supposed to be chaste and humble, but he's a little too eager to be friends with him. I'd better keep an eye on this one. There's also a summoner, and boy oh boy, if you thought I didn't like the friar, you have another thing coming. You should hear what the summoner has to say about friars, but make sure you don't do it before or after you eat. You'll either lose your appetite or lose your stomach. Although, that might happen from too long a look at this guy's face too. Boils, everywhere. Big, pus-filled spots. Ugh, he would make you lose your stomach if you just looked at him. He scares little kids away, for goodness sakes. They say it's what's inside that counts, which is true, but this guy is evil to the core. He takes people to be reviewed for their sins by the church. It's a good system, don't get me wrong, but they've got the wrong man doing it. This guy rents out concubines to people, luring them into a sin, then extorts money from them afterwards, promising not to take them to trial. It's a protection racket. He told me all this when he was drunk, and that was surprising. Except for that little admission, the only words I could ever make out that he said were "Quaestio quid juris." Nasty kind of fellow. I'll be avoiding him for this trip. The summoner has a buddy, too. Someone equally as devilish, but a little more open about it, and a little less ugly. He's a partner, with waxy, sallow skin that looks like rat's tails, and waxy hair. His eyes stick out, like he's just staring, all the time. You wouldn't believe the things he has to say. All he does is talk about how he just preaches his sermons for money. I mean, really? Is that what it's come to? I think the church has the right idea in selling indulgences. I really do. But this isn't the man for the job. He told us that his sole motivation is profit and gain. But that's what he teaches against? It's all about the money with him. He carries around all these relics, but I know better. His bones of Christ are actually just pig bones, and all his other relics are fake too. Sheesh. He can definitely speak very well, but his morals are way out of line with his job. He needs some serious work. For an employee of the church, he sure has his priorities out of order. I'll let him spend his time with the summoner, and I'll avoid them both. Don't worry though. There are some good people on this trip to Canterbury too. One of them is a cleric, and he goes to Oxford, where he studies. I like him. He gives me some hope for the church's employment. I mean, the church is doing the right things, but it's got all the wrong people. The pardoner, the summoner. This cleric could change that. He's got the tonsure and everything, and rarely says much. His nose is always in a book. He seems very virtuous and wise, and most of all, he's very humble. He's nothing like the priest or nun, because he spends all his money on books rather than nice clothes or pets. No, this man's mind is rich, not his pocket. He's also very grateful, always prays for the people who are helping him pay for school. There's lots to be said for his morals. I hope he stays with us the whole time. At least he's one of the few nice ones on this trip. It's too bad he's so quiet. Fortunately, he's not the only one with good morals and humility. There's also a parson. He's a good fellow, kind of a country boy. He's a priest at one of the churches in rural Scotland, even though not many folks go there anymore. Those rural churches used to be filled every Sunday when I was a boy, but not since the plague wiped out so many of our population. Now too many people have died off. Most priests are leaving for the cities and abandoning their congregations for more populated areas. It's an admirable man who sticks with people like that. He doesn't say too much, but the old adage is correct. Actions speak louder than words. He's a kind man, and clearly committed to his group. Plus, he understands that we're not all rich. I've heard rumors that he won't excommunicate people for failing to pay their tithe. Now, I'm all for the tithe, but even I forget once in a while, and it's just by luck that I've corrected my mistake in time to avoid excommunication. He's a good fellow. I'm glad to have him on this trip. I think most of these people, especially that summoner and that partner, could learn a thing or two from him about morals.
The Canterbury Tales is often cited as the most influential work in English, with good reason. It is the first major work written in English, and it proved in a region where French is the most prevalent language that English could be more beautiful and more poetic than the so-called most romantic language. Geoffrey Chaucer, a very educated man, was surrounded by very important political, geographical, and educational connections that allowed him to take major positions in government and travel to far-off places like Italy and beyond. The unique geopolitical position gave Chaucer a lot of insight on the class structure that existed in medieval England at that time. The Canterbury Tales is very much a reflection of his criticisms and observations of the many classes that existed through the form of an estate satire. However, his criticisms were only allowed to reach so far, since such endeavors were funded by the upper class. Therefore, his main satires would address religious figures and the lower class. Chaucer was very much influenced by Boccaccio's The Decameron, which shares a similar narrative frame structure in which a group of individuals are on a journey in which they share stories. The story has two frames, the overarching frame in which pilgrims are traveling to Canterbury, and the smaller story frame in which individual stories of each pilgrim are told. Each story is supposed to reflect something about the pilgrim telling the story, and this is prevalent especially in the Pardoner's Tale. Chaucer's main criticisms addressed the church, which he felt was not doing its job in helping the poor and the impoverished. He uses characters like the nun and the monk to show well-meaning people who don't fulfill the duty that their occupation should be fulfilling. After the Black Plague, the church was in disarray after the death of many of their members and officials. Thus, these roles were given to those who were unfit for them, mostly the aristocratic upper class. The English used in Canterbury Tales is not the same as the modern English used today. The version of the story you read was a modern translation of the Middle English that Chaucer wrote the poem in. This is in a time before Shakespeare, before English was as influential as it is now, and thus the language is very different. Unlike French, English evolved very rapidly throughout history, to the point where Old English seems so foreign to us now. Because Canterbury Tales is supposed to be an overview of life in the Middle Ages, it is important to understand the roles of each social class inside the poem. Clergymen, people like the nun, monk, and the friar, were supposed to take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, just like today, and it is obvious in the story that these characters have gone against them. The friar, in particular, is a very nasty person, someone who falls for earthly temptations, like lust and greed, and Chaucer is pointing this out. During this time, friars were known to be very lenient on their vows. Similar to the summoner, the pardoner is someone who claims to have objects called indulgences, which are claimed to be a free pass to heaven. He sells them and claims he has certificates that free people of all their sins, and this is another criticism Chaucer has, specifically criticizing the idea of indulgences and the oppression of the unable-minded. Pardoners were seen as disdainful figures, and Chaucer criticizes them here. On the opposite side, the parson is someone who is stationed at a small town. It is expected of clergymen to travel to large cities because of the low number of clergymen during this time, but the parson represents the parish priests that stay in the small villages and preach the right values that the church is meant to uphold. The way the parson teaches is separate from the institution of the church, and this is important. Finally, it is important to understand that Chaucer only meant for the Canterbury Tales to be a snapshot of medieval society, not necessarily a complete representation of that society. While each role is built off archetypes, each character does not necessarily represent the whole part of that class in the society. This distinction allows us to understand that each character merely represents Chaucer's possible criticisms for people in these roles.
Let's talk about the Canterbury Tales. Alright, class. Today we're going to learn about the Canterbury Tales. The Canterbury Tales is a framed narrative written by Geoffrey Chaucer in the late 14th century. So, now that you've read it, what do you think the themes that are represented in the Canterbury Tales are?
Well, one theme is appearances are deceiving.
But that's the theme in everything.
No, it's true. Think about it. The Oxford cleric, he has like bad clothing and sallow face, and he's really skinny, but he's got a good heart inside. He's a nice guy.
Well, you're right that the Oxford cleric shows how appearances can be deceiving, but I think he's most significant as a contrast to the other religious characters in the book, because the most important theme in the poem is that it's the theme of the corruption in the church during this time period. Like, you look at the nun and the monk and the friar, who none of them, the nun and the monk don't act like nuns and monks should. The friar, he hits on women and he is rich, which friars are supposed to be beggars. And the pardoner, makes money for his own greed. There's a lot of corruption in the church, and that's what Chaucer makes the most fun of.
I think that also just brings in the theme that greed corrupts. Greed is actually the cause for the corruption. And you not only see that in the religious figures, but you also see within the tale that the pardoner tells himself, where three men find gold and their greed leads them to kill one another.
And since the church and the state are connected, it creates a lot of corruption between the two.
Alright, you guys are all right. Just to expand upon what Isaac said, because the church and the state are so connected, they remove the church from its original goal, which is to make people more educated in the spiritual sense, and also to bring more people to God. And because the church and the state are so connected, they become embroiled in political problems and very entangled in other secular things. And this doesn't help them to achieve their goal.
Hey teacher, lady, I think there's something that you forgot.
Alright, so the final theme is the importance of class stratification in the Canterbury Tales.
Oh, pick me. Okay, alright, you know what? Okay, I think that the last theme, you're right, is that that social commentary on class stratification is really important. And I think that Chaucer really represents that in the use of characters and the characters' tales. So, for instance, he demonstrates the characteristics of the upper class when he talks about the monk's activities of hunting, and he talks about the nun and her fine table manners and her language. And he shows the activities of the lower class when he talks about the cleric and how little money he has and the people that the friar helps. And I think in a lot of ways this really helps to contextualize the book and discuss its history and the time it was written in a social context.
Great job, guys! You got all the themes! Yay!
Five major themes in the Canterbury Tales are as follows. Appearances are deceiving, the corruption of the church, greed's corrupting effects, the union between the church and the state, and the importance of class structure. Each plays a role in the overall work, however, the purpose of each theme is intertwined completely. On the topic of appearances are deceiving, the Oxford cleric is referred to as follows. His horse was thinner than a rake, but he had a hollow look, a sober stare, a tone of virtue filled his speech, and gladly would learn, and gladly teach. This shows the Oxford cleric's weak physical exterior, but shows strong spiritual and mental interior. He is moral, kind, and learned, even though he looks impoverished. The corruption of the church is exemplified by the pardoner who parades his relics to sell for money. When offering his services, he says, "I've some relics in my bale, and pardons too, as full and fine, I hope, as any in England given me by the Pope." This shows classic pardoner behavior and reinforces the idea that pardoners are untrustworthy and represent a corrupt facet of the church's dogma. Greed's corrupting effect is also shown through the pardoner, in which he preaches sermons that he himself does not follow. He says, "I mean to have money, wool and cheese and wheat, though it were given to me by the poorest lad." This shows that he has no care for others, and instead would rather have money, no matter where it comes from, even from starving children. He is uncaring, and his greed has brought him to this place. The negative effects of the connection between the church and the state are shown through the summoner, a person who is not a clergyman, but serves both a religious and governing role. In the quotation, "He knew their secrets, they did what he said." The narrator shows the summoner's corruption and how the evolution of such a system created such a corrupt role in overall society. Finally, the importance of class structure is highlighted, as each character is referred to by their class instead of their names. This shows the differentiation between all the members of the pilgrimage and shows the overall effects of class on the relationships between people and the opportunities that each class gives them. There are differing attitudes towards class structure, but class structure is highlighted constantly in the text.
So, could you just talk to us a little more about these dogs of yours? Like, you really seem to like them.
Yeah, I love dogs. I mean, they're amazing creatures.
So, what's with the gun? You seem to be really into hunting. How did you get involved with that?
Well, I've been hunting for as long as I can remember. It's just been a part of my daily life.
What's that like, being in a monastery, though? Wouldn't it make it hard to hunt?
Who cares about that?
You find time?
Yeah.
So, you seem like a pretty forgiving guy. Could you talk about that?
Yes, I enjoy helping other people, especially the poor, because they definitely need helping. And oftentimes, with my services, I receive very many rewards.
You also have impressive table manners. I mean, immaculate. You haven't spilled a thing. Where did you learn those kind of things? I mean, don't you stay in a convent most of the time?
Well, manners are really important, and I like to make sure that my manners are perfect wherever I go. So I just learned young, and I've continued and made improvements. And
Excuse me. Excuse me. Over here. Can you... Excuse me. What are you reading?
It's about a pilgrimage.
Is it good? You like it? Who wrote it?
Chaucer.
Well, another, speaking of things you learned when you were young, could you talk a little bit about just your experience with the French language? I mean, you speak very good French, but for someone living in England, you know, especially in a convent, that's a little uncharacteristic. Could you talk about your schooling for that a little bit?
Well, I started at Stratford out of Bow, and most people might say that my French isn't as good because I am from England, but I mean, I still like French and I speak it.
Okay. So it helps you, you would say?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what? Thanks. Okay, now that we have your attention, what's it like to be a cleric at Oxford? Is it tough?
It's pretty great, but I don't have a lot of money, so I can't buy a lot of food. But my friends pay for my education.
That's good. That's nice. What's your favorite thing? What do you enjoy studying?
I love studying religion.
Good. Do you think you'll be a clergy member? I mean, I see you've got the tonsure, the haircut. Are you looking forward to that?
Definitely looking forward to that.
So, what do you think of the Oxford cleric? You guys are both holy men. Seem like you've got at least something in common.
He's a good guy. He likes his books, likes to read. I got my books right here. Nothing much.
Yeah. Seems like a pretty holy guy. I mean, he's really into his studies. What do you think about that?
I think reading and studying it's there, but there's other things to life. You see?
Mm-hmm.
That's about it.
So, have you talked to that monk very much? He seems like a pretty cool guy. Like, what do you think of him?
Yeah, he is a cool guy. He doesn't let his monastic role get in the way of what he likes to do, and he likes to have fun.
Good. So, like, what do you think about that, though? I mean, he's a nun, or he's a monk, so he's supposed to be, you know, really, chaste and honorable, but he kind of doesn't seem to put a lot of stock in, you know, Saint Benet and Saint Maur, the holy decrees. Is that okay with you? What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's fine.
And he hunts. What do you think? Seems a little odd, especially for someone living in a monastery.
I mean, some people might think that it's odd, but I mean, by my standard, it's fine.
I hear you've never been to London. Why'd you stay at your church in rural areas?
Everyone goes to London. See, if everyone goes to London, there's going to be no one here for helping my people. So, I'm here to help my people. That's it.
So, do you like being a partner? Do you have a lot of friends? Do people love you because you sell them indulgences?
Being a partner is the greatest thing ever. All the money I get, it's crazy. And friends, who needs friends when you got Abe, my man George? I need no one else.
So, what do you think of the other people on this trip? Like that partner?
Don't mention that guy's name. Selling fake indulgences, money, money, money. Where has goodness gone these days?
So, do you like the company on the trip? Have you met anyone cool? What do you think of that parson guy? Is he nice?
Don't even get me started on the parson. He thinks he's so high and mighty because he preaches for no personal gain, and he stays in that cheap little town where no one gives him any money, and he doesn't go to London, and then he looks down on me because I make all this dough. But I mean, really, I have it better here. Who does he think he is for judging me?
So you seem pretty attached to this musical instrument. I don't recognize it though. What is it? How do you pick it up?
Oh, sorry. It's a hurdy-gurdy, and it is an excellent instrument that I enjoy using very much. Yes.
So what's your favorite thing about speaking French?
Well, it's so romantic, and all my friends speak it.
Your friends speak French? In a monastery? Where all the texts are in Latin?
Well,
So, you go by Hubert instead of Friar? Hubert?
Yes.
Or anything like that? Could you talk about that?
I prefer others to see me the way...
Hey, Hubert!
Hubert, over here, bud. Don't pay attention to the girls. Pay attention to me.
Okay. I prefer it when people refer to me by who I really am, not by some meaningless title.
So, you and that friar had some pretty angry stories to tell. What do you think of that guy?
Dude, that guy is the worst. He thinks he's so cool, but I just really can't stand him. Wait, let me get. Oh shoot.
So, it's funny that you talk about, helping the poor, because the summoner was kind of harsh, kind of accusing you almost as if, like, friars only help the rich. Did you talk about the summoner? You guys kind of seem like you're at odds for some reason.
Well, the summoner, let's be real, he's not very attractive, and he's also super greedy, which I am not.
So,
Hey, give
what
that
about
back.
that
Question,
partner?
quit your.
What do you think of the partner? You seem to be
I don't
hanging out with that
understand
summoner a
why
lot.
he wants
Do you like
to-
him? What's he like?
Summoner? He's the best. I mean, sure, people judge him for his looks. Not everyone can be beautiful like me. But, I mean, he's a good person well, okay. He's just like me inside. We're great. We get along. It's awesome. Everyone wishes they were like us.
So, you studied French at Stratford Audubon, and you're not perfect at it, but, you're still very fluent. But it's kind of weird, right? Because aren't all the religious texts in Latin? And don't you live in a convent?
Well, you see, I love French, and yeah, all religious texts might be in Latin, but I still want to speak French.
Alright, so you seem to be kind of enjoying yourself on this trip. I can't really tell because you're always reading, but do you like the other people? Like, what about that nun? What do you think of her?
I think she cares more about her dogs than taking care of the poor.
Could you tell me more? What else?
Well, she also cares a lot about her personal appearance, which a nun shouldn't do. And she's out on this pilgrimage when she should be in convents.
Now that we've got you back and conscious and hopefully a little more sober, what do you like about being a summoner?
I like being mean to people. It's pretty fun. That cash, can't beat that cash, man.
By the way, while you're here, how would you like to be freed of all your sins? I have right here a legitimate veil from Mary, our mother. Very cheap, only like $1,000, no big deal. And I mean, what's $1,000 when you're spending eternity in heaven? No? No? Sure? Okay. I'll just go sell it to someone else, no big deal. You can go to hell.
And I don't care about the money.